The first time I sang with them, I was 11 years old. That was just because they needed some extra people and
Really?
to fill in.
What was it like to be singing it with a bunch of adults when you were 11 years old?
Oh, I knew all of them. I grew up with it. I was born into it. Well, my parents were original members in 1920, and so when I came along for rehearsals and when we went anywhere.
What do you think drew you to classical music?
Well, of course, when they started, I think there wasn't a whole lot else that was available, really. But my mother was a pianist, and her sister was a violinist, and I just grew up hearing music. Classical music, there's so much to it that you won't get in Elvis, for instance, or pop music, for the most part. But it's rich. There's so much depth to it. I don't think you'll find much monotony in Brahms or, there's so much there. There's so much to listen for, so much to hear. You hear a beautiful piece of music and all the different parts that come together. Mm-hmm. It started out, as my understanding, it started out, it was part of the women's club, formed a women's chorus. Mm-hmm. And then after a while they decided, well, it'd be more fun if we had our husbands join. Okay. And so it became the Burbank Choral Club, which it was actually a choral club. You know, they did things together as well as just singing together. They had picnics, they had dinners together, they went down, exchanged concerts with other areas. I believe Redondo Beach was one, and I know Redlands was another. Mm-hmm. Did things when there weren't so many other things to do as there are now.
The choral group, you mentioned that you had been the flower girl at the wedding, right? What was that like? Do you have any memories of that?
Yes, it was in a house that still exists over on Bethany Street, belonged to the Smith family. And it was just a wedding in the house. Mm-hmm. And the bride came down the stairs. I preceded the bride down the stairs. And
was there any members from lot of members from the choral club there too, or was it kind of a small?
I think it was a small group.
Yeah. Did anyone know that there was a relationship developing between these two, or did it just come out of nowhere?
That I couldn't tell. I don't know. You know, I was only 10 or 11 years old at that time.
Now, did your father have any memories, or did he ever tell you what it was like to sing in the Olympics at all?
No, not really. I'm afraid I gave away quite a few things to my son recently. Well, I think probably my favorite was Lou Nash, because he was the one that was, I think, probably was conductor for the longest period of time during my time.
Okay.
Yeah. And he did like all kinds of music. We got into a lot of folk music during the 60s, and in fact we had a small group called the Choraleers, and we traveled around some of the time and put on shows. There were about a dozen of us, I guess.
Where did you travel to?
Well, we went to Santa Maria, and we sang for local things from time to time.
I had a quick one. Now, you sang with Chester Harrison also, right?
Yes.
Is like the one in, I think, in 1963?
I think that was one, probably, that I was...
Charlie Poe?
Uh-huh. He was very good in explaining a lot to us. He talked to us a lot about, well, really about civil rights.
How so?
And about how Negro spirituals had developed, and the meanings behind many of them. You know, they were, for instance, Drinking Gourd. The song, The Drinking Gourd, and how that was follow the drinking gourd, and it meant to follow the Big Dipper. Yeah, he explained a lot like that. You know, he was a great... I was not raised to have any prejudice, just wasn't anything we did. So, but he was a very interesting man and fun to work with.
What I'd like you to tell me a little bit about Cliff Dunderland, about when you knew he was dying. What was that last show like?
He told us he came to rehearsal. Frank, I believe, was directing us that night. And he came to rehearsal and he said he had something to tell us. And he told us that he had AIDS. And he said, I want you to decide, do you want me to stay or do you want me to go? And it was almost unanimous. I think there's one person left, but unanimous that we wanted him to stay. And he stayed just as long. He conducted sitting on a stool part of the time toward the end, but he stayed as long as he possibly could.
Okay. Do you remember the last show that he did? Or was he, by that time, was he too sick to conduct at this point? That you knew this was going to be his last show?
Well, yes. Sad. It was sad, but it was special. The fact that he had hung on and done all he could for as long as he could. You know, it was...
How did you feel about... What was your reaction when you found out that he was ill?
Well, we were sick, too. I mean, we hated to see, you know... Now I think more could be done for him than there was then. Mm-hmm. But at that time, there really wasn't a whole lot. We had a Christmas party at his house after that. Did things. My husband and I took him to things at Burroughs High School, mm-hmm. and took him places. You know, he was in a wheelchair by that time. And we visited him at the hospice, and I think there was a nice service for him. People cared about him.
Basically, what do you think was your most important contribution to the choir?
Well, I hope it was my voice, but I was also a librarian at one time, and I was in charge of social things, gatherings, mm-hmm. and used my house here for sometimes for rehearsals, for meetings, for you know.
Did your kids help out? Now, were they involved in the choir too at any one point?
No, they never were. My son is a cellist. He's been with both the Burbank Symphony and the Burbank Philharmonic Orchestra, and still is with the Burbank Philharmonic. My daughter went in for ballet instead.
What was the original cost when your parents were...
Well, I remember them being $2. Then I joined, probably. But, of course, it was under the school system then.
Okay.
And it was a night school class, mm-hmm. and so that paid... Lou Nash was the music superintendent for the mm-hmm. Burbank schools. And so, you know, that was all part of... they gave us a place to rehearse. Pretty much, I guess, paid his. Okay. And we bought a lot of our own music.